I'm a PhD student, living somewhere in Eastern Europe. Sorry about being a bit ambiguous, it's just that I'm a little uncomfortable about sharing some details. I'm a quiet and mellow guy, so I've been looking for a place to stay where I wouldn't be bothered by noise or have to deal with messy housemates. I lived for about a year somewhere pretty close to university, sharing an apartment with a housemate. Things were alright in the beginning, but I eventually decided to move out due to my noisy housemate. He'd often party until 4 to 5 a.m., which drove me up the wall since I'm also dealing with insomnia and have nightmares pretty often. I find it hard to sleep even during quiet nights. Having someone blasting music at 4 a.m. in the next room is just hell for me. I know I might not be the life of the party, but the 4 a.m. party definitely is the death of me. About 2 months ago, on one of these sleepless nights, I decided enough was enough. So I looked up apartments around the city. In just a couple of hours, I found this nice offer, a cheap and cozy room in a 3-room apartment, a few bus stops away from university. The post was made by some young girl. I decided to check the place out. I was greeted by the young girl that posted the offer. She spoke with a foreign accent, and she'd often avoid eye contact. Maybe she was shy. Regardless, she showed me around the place. Let's call her Nadia. The place looked alright, not to mention that the landlord was living on the same floor, so that would guarantee it would be quiet. The landlord was some old guy that didn't even bother to show up. Nadia told me she's usually dealing with the new tenants that move in, and the landlord is just showing up once a month to collect the rent. I asked her when can I move in. She told me that the guy that was living in that room will move out in a couple of days. Before leaving, instead of heading towards the exit, I accidentally turned towards one of the rooms, moving my hand to reach the door handle. "What are you doing?" she asked, confused. I realized I forgot which direction the entrance door was, and I was trying to open the door of her bedroom. I apologized, saying that I'm no Magellan or Columbus, that's for sure. We both laughed about it and shrugged it off. Come to think of it, Nadia seemed a bit scared, seeing me head towards her bedroom. I can't blame her. It would be pretty weird to see a stranger you've just met trying to enter your room. I didn't give it too much thought. The following week, I moved in. I figured out I'd bring a bottle of wine, having a drink with my new housemates. There was another girl living there. I'll call her Lydia. She was a few years younger than us, while Nadia was about my age. Both of them were university students, so we chatted for a couple of hours, joked, decided to play Mac out for a short while. It's a popular card game here. I think it's also called Crazy Eights. Anyways, every now and then, I'd get up from the table, going to the bathroom. The weird thing was, every time I headed for the bathroom, Nadia would also get up and step into the hallway. She'd just stand there, looking at me as I headed for the bathroom. The second time it happened, I turned around and asked if everything is alright. She just nodded, following with an anxious yeah. I thought it was pretty weird. Then it hit me. She was looking towards the door to her bedroom. My first thought was to ask her about it, so I can assure her that I'm not going to invade her privacy or anything. I changed my mind, not wanting to creep her out or make her feel even more uncomfortable, so I just ignored her, heading for the bathroom. After a few weeks of restless sleep, I finally managed to get some proper rest. It felt good to be in a new home. Nadia was a bit weird, but all in all, she seemed like a good girl. Lydia was also very nice. To be fair, we didn't really spend a lot of time together most of the time. We'd each just do our own thing. In a funny way, each of us was a ghost that would haunt the other too. We'd bump into each other now and then, either in the kitchen or on the hallway, say hello to one another, then move on. A couple of weeks later, I've had a nightmare. In my dream, I was running away from something I couldn't see clearly in some dark, snowy forest. The entity made a weird noise, which actually prompted me to wake up. I was startled, but I returned to sleep shortly after. These kinds of dreams are pretty common for me, so I'm used to them. Early in the morning, I went to the bathroom, hearing a subtle sound coming from Nadia's room. It sounded like a humming voice. What was she doing? I thought she might be humming a song or something like that. Since I figured out she's awake, I knocked on her door. We didn't get any hot water that morning, so I wanted to ask her if she knows anything about that. She didn't respond. I knocked again. No answer. I figured out she's busy, or she didn't want to chat to me, so I let her be. I went to the kitchen to grab a bite Just a short while later, Nadia enters the kitchen, asking me why I was knocking. I told her about the hot water, and she responded, "Don't worry, things will get back to normal soon." Even though she was clearly talking about the water, I felt a bit bothered by her answer. Something felt off. It's almost as if she wasn't talking about the hot water, but something completely different. Nadia left the kitchen, and I followed shortly after. We were both headed for our rooms. I reached my room and opened the door, then Nadia reached her room and suddenly stopped. She was standing there in front of the door without saying anything. I asked her if there's a problem. She didn't respond. I insisted. She turned around, just looking at me, expressionless. I just apologized and entered my room. As soon as I closed the door, I heard the door to her room opening and closing. I was starting to worry about her. She seemed worried and on the edge. I thought she might be under a lot of stress or something bad happened to her. They hardly knew each other, so I didn't know how I could help her. I spoke to Lydia, and she told me she didn't know a lot about Nadia either. She noticed the weird behavior and the humming too. She had no clue. She seemed a bit creeped out by Nadia, so I comforted her. I told her that maybe Nadia is a little troubled or stressed. A few days later, the landlord showed up to collect the rent. I was home alone, but Lydia left me the rent money. Nadia said she already paid rent, so the landlord will only ask for our money. After paying up, I asked the landowner if he knows anything about Nadia. The old man said he thinks she's a bit shy and might not know how hard life can be. He also told me that a lot of 20-year-olds are like that, but they'll grow out of it once they get used to life in a new city. That didn't really help. The old man likely didn't care about the tenants that much. He was just there to collect the rent. Fair enough. The next weeks went by, being pretty monotone and repetitive, at least during daytime. During evenings and early in the morning, I'd sometimes hear the humming coming from Nadia's room. I've also had another nightmare. In this one, I was in my apartment and I could see that creepy silhouette from my previous nightmare in the hallway. This time, she was more detailed. She had a slim figure. She was somewhat foggy and her eyes were glowing. Her eyes were two round, green circles glowing into the dark. I couldn't make out any other details. I suddenly woke up, just like last time. Had a look around the apartment to calm myself down. Nothing unusual. As I've previously said, the days went by without anything too eventful happening. However, there was one thing that kept bothering me. I kept thinking about it, and the thought wouldn't leave me alone. The thing the landlord said. He said that a lot of 20-year-olds are like Nadia. Nadia was the same age as me. We were both 24. Lydia was 20. I figured out I'd bring it up next time we talk. When the rent day came up, he called me, telling me that he's out of town, and he'll be back to collect the rent in 2 days. After a short while, I asked the landowner the same question just like last time. He asked me if I'm into Nadia and suggested me to ask her out. I told him that's not the case, and I'm a little worried about her well-being. He mentioned the 20-year-olds thing again, so I corrected him, explaining that Lydia's the one that's 20. He apologized, saying that he got Lydia's name wrong. I followed by saying that Nadia is actually 24. He paused for a few seconds without saying anything. Did I say anything wrong? I asked. He stood silent for a few seconds. I thought he hung up. Then he asked me, "Who's Nadia?" His question, so filled with confusion and concern, shook me. I reminded him that Nadia is one of the tenants. He told me that he knows that, saying she's the 20-year-old girl. I told him again that the younger girl is named Lydia and Nadia is the 24-year-old girl. He sounded annoyed over the phone, saying that he's celebrating his brother's birthday and he's not in the mood for stupid pranks. He angrily told me that he'll be back for the rent in 2 days. Then he hung up. This didn't make any sense. I called him back immediately, trying to figure out what's going on. He wouldn't answer. He was angry. Lydia was in her room, chatting with a friend over the phone. I didn't feel like telling her, since she'd easily freak out. I figured out it wouldn't make sense to scare her for no good reason. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the old man is diagnosed with dementia and he has difficulties remembering some things. He didn't seem to remember my name either, but he didn't really present the symptoms of a patient with dementia. Maybe he was drunk, although he didn't really sound like it. Then it hit me. Could Nadia be an illegal tenant? No, that would be stupid. It wouldn't make any sense. I decided I'd have to ask Lydia something, but I chose my words carefully so I wouldn't freak her out. I asked her if she noticed anything weird about the landowner before I moved in. She told me something pretty unsettling. The landowner told her something among the following lines: "You two are by far the best tenants I've had." This didn't add up. Before I moved in, there were 3 people here: Lydia, Nadia, and the guy that moved out. I joked that the old man might be better at counting money than people. Then Lydia just forgot about it. I figured out the only way to solve this was to confront Nadia directly when she got home. Somewhere around 11 p.m., she showed up. I opened the door and stepped outside. She stood there in the hallway next to the entrance without saying anything. I said good evening. She didn't say anything. I decided to break the silence and confronted her directly. "Nadia, the landowner said he'll be back in 2 days to collect the rent." She stood there, repeating my last words: "Collect the rent." I followed it with, "He said he doesn't know who you are. What's going on here?" As the situation got so tense, I didn't even realize that I forgot to turn on the light in the hallway. After flicking the switch, I saw that Nadia had her palms over her face. I didn't understand what was going on. Then I heard it, her humming. I asked her, "Why do you do that?" She ignored me and started humming louder. Then her humming turned into a grunt, and the grunt turned into a scream. The scream grew louder and louder. Suddenly, the light went out. Nadia was screaming so loudly it was hurting my ears. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. I pointed it towards Nadia. That wasn't Nadia. I didn't know what I was seeing, but that was not Nadia. I immediately took a step back, entered my room, slammed the door, and locked it. I grabbed a dumbbell that was sitting on the ground and armed myself. The humming started again. Then came the grunt, then the scream, then the louder scream. I was horrified, but I still remembered about Lydia. What if Nadia would go and hurt her? Lydia was probably still in her room. I didn't know what to do. I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking violently, and called the police. I whispered, barely being able to speak, the address, and told them to come quickly. Then I heard loud tapping sounds against the door. Then I could hear her screams again. Then I heard some horrible scratching noises. I was frightened and stood there without moving, holding the dumbbell in my right hand, prepared to attack should she enter my room. Then it stopped. It went quiet. It seemed as if she went away, almost as if she vanished. I wouldn't dare step outside the bedroom. What if it was just an ambush? I decided to wait for the police to show up. I could barely hear Lydia sobbing in her room. I wanted to unlock the door and go and help her, but I was afraid Nadia might still be there. I yelled, announcing to Lydia that the police are on their way. I told her to stay put. About 10, maybe 12 minutes later, the police came. As soon as they reached my door, I stepped outside, relieved. Lydia did the same, crying and shaking violently. I hugged her, trying to comfort her, although I could hardly control myself. I turned around and I jumped, seeing the scratches on my door. A woman's nails couldn't have made those scratches. They looked more like something that would be left by a knife that was scratched against the door. I thought that Nadia might have been armed. Who knows what she could do? The police officers told us that they didn't see anyone outside or in the staircase. Eventually, we told them what happened. They told us to stay put, as they had to check Nadia's room. They kicked the door, their sidearms ready, but nobody could have prepared us for what we saw. Behind the door, there was just a cupboard, a narrow space filled with brooms and cleaning products covered in dust. This didn't make any sense. Where did Nadia live? What was going on there? The police searched the area and helped us calm down. We went to the station and told them everything that happened. It was confusing, and it shook them as well. Nothing made any sense. The landowner was just as shocked when he returned and found out about the whole ordeal. Apparently, he never knew of this third tenant. We talked about it for hours, trying to make sense of what happened. The whole event left us puzzled and traumatized. Both Lydia and I moved out after a few days. We shared the same bedroom for a while. Before parting ways, she revealed to me that she also had nightmares during some nights. She'd also describe a dark silhouette in a snowy forest. Well, I didn't want to share one particular detail. That horrifying night, when I pointed my flashlight towards Nadia, I didn't want to believe it, or more likely, I tried to forget it, but her eyes were glowing green.